Okay, hello. We're going to talk really quickly about 3D printing, because I know this has been... I'm going to be trying to do more and more of these videos, but this is just something that I thought that I should cover. I will make more videos that are more basic, but this is a good technique that should be covered. So I'm always just making sure that the nozzle and the printer and the bed I'm using is correct, because these are the printer will get quite confused if they're not correct. The filament I'm using is also has to be correct, obviously, and so that's fine. I went in here and these are my own presets that I've kind of found for myself, and anytime I print something that I know I'm going to print more of, I kind of save a preset. Here, there aren't too many right now, but I also save the file as a whole, and then that way you don't have to save the preset. Anyway, so I'm going to go ahead, the advanced settings are on, but the main thing from like just the system presets that are on every single in your computers, the main differences are, well, so the big thing to look at here is in quality is the layer height, right? If I go ahead and slice this, it took a while. Each layer is 0.2 millimeters tall, so it takes 150 layers to make this thing. You do the math, that's 30 centimeters or 30 millimeters tall. These other ones I never even mess with, but they're totally there for you to use if you want. Seam just means these white things. So eventually, after it finishes, the printer finishes one. If it's in the middle of the thing like this, this is how it starts this layer. So you can see every single layer, right? So it finishes this whole layer, and then it bumps to layer 2, and it does the whole thing over and over again. That's why it takes so long, right? These are thousands and thousands of lines of code. Let's pick a random layer, and we're gonna go and look at it. So it does those supports first, it goes around there, and then eventually when it's finally done, it's gonna stop, right? And so then when it bumps up to the next layer, it's gonna kind of leave a little bit of an artifact behind, right? So you don't actually see it in this case because it's not on the right layer, I guess. But it ends in these white seams basically, and so that's not necessarily a weak part, but it's you can definitely see them in the final part. So they can cause friction if this has to be a good fit or something, some kind of bearing fit. Just something to keep out for. You can make this random, and so then they're speckled throughout the part, which overall is definitely not as nice, right? So you're going to have these random little pock marks kind of throughout the part, but that way they're not all condensed in this one thing that might be difficult to deal with. But for the most part, I keep it to aligned, and it's easily sandable if we need to, but I don't even sand it a lot of the time. Okay, precision. This is also extremely important, but these printers are so good that I'm not gonna have you guys touch this for a while, at least. The other thing is wall generator. I switched this to Arachne instead of Classic. You don't really know what that has. You don't really need to know what that means right now, but that's what I do, and I don't mess with any of this other stuff. Strength. So strength is the biggest kind of change setting to tweak. So I want this to be relatively strong, right? 3 while loops is really strong. 4 while loops is very strong. You can keep increasing. Eventually, this thin strip here is going to be completely while loop. Right now it's still got this red structure. You can see the red means sparse infill. And right now that's pretty dense, right? So that's at 20%. If you make it something like 5, you can kind of see, and it's this pattern, right? You can make that a different pattern as well, but I'm not going to. You can see 5 is much sparser, right? That's where that sparse comes from. We're going to change it back to 20. But again, remember, the main way to increase your stiffness is stiffness globally is to increase your while loops, and then locally, if this part is undergoing some specific tensions or stuff, you can increase this density. And I've increased it right now just because it's going to be undergoing like kind of a lot of wear and tear. So some things are more need that more than others. Okay, I never touched this, but you can feel free to read that if you want in your own program. I honestly never touched the speed, so, well, almost never touched the speed. I definitely never touch first layer speed because this has to do, just don't mess with this. It needs to be very slow on the very, very first layer to stick to the print bed very well. Right, and then it can start to speed up in the subsequent layers. If I want to make something go faster, if you can take a look at this. The inner wall takes up 23 minutes of your time. Well, actually, no, sorry. Yeah, that's obviously the most. 23 minutes. There's 29% of the time, I think. I don't know if that's time or filament. But they're fairly. They have a fairly big relationship. So inner wall and sparse infill, right? Those are the two biggest time wasters, right? So if you want to speed this up, you think, oh well, let's increase the speed of the inner wall. First of all, 350 is also already very fast, right? If I bump it up to 500, which is the rated like maximum speed of this printer, you see it went from 23 minutes to 23 minutes, I believe. 23. Yeah, so I think you saved like 20 seconds or something. There's no real point messing with this. I don't know. It feels like I should have gone down a little bit. But what I do instead, and so I mean you can do the same for this and all that. But what I do instead is I come to the device once it's already printing. So right now this is not going to do anything. This only takes effect during printing. But I will change this to sport or ludicrous mode. And you have to keep in mind that this will affect the strength of the part a little bit, but usually if I keep it on sport, it's an extra 25% faster, and it doesn't affect it too much. Okay, support. I have these holes in my part, so I want them to be supported. If they're smaller holes, I wouldn't care so much, but these are fairly big holes compared to the. Yeah, I mean, I totally could leave that off, and I think it would print okay, but it just wouldn't. There'd be more of an overhang, and it wouldn't come out as nice. Right? When you're printing holes like this horizontally, you'll notice that these really start to flatten out kind of a lot when you don't have the right support. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how to avoid this if it's really crucial and what to do, but that's kind of more in the CAD side of things on shape, and so I'm not going to deal with that right now. It's what I want. You can have a tree, so it's got these kind of organic looking things, or you could do normal mode. So tree is normally for these small little overhangs, and the normal mode I use for large overhangs, like if I had printed this in a different orientation, for example. Yeah. Normal is like a grid. Oh yeah, you see it now. Right, so it's like, Anyway, tree. Others, you'll see there's this brim on here. Skirt, brim. So that's this blue thing, right? You can see that's what it is. It is. I'm surprised they put it in. So this is set to auto. So I usually just let it do what it does, but it almost never puts a brim in here. I've put it on myself when I've been worried about adhesion manually, but so if instead of auto I put auto brim only, this would do the same thing. This is to again help the bed adhesion so it doesn't peel up because of cooling. But well, I'll leave it at that. I don't honestly know why it's here. Like I think it would be fine if I uncheck that, but you know what, I'll let it do its thing. Anyway, so this is a very basic part, right? The only things I have to support are these holes, and I honestly don't really have to support them. But it's other than that, it's one extrude, right? So there's no other complexity. I will say the one thing that I do want, and so it's pretty structural, right? 3 and 20%. But right here, the plan is to clamp this section to a piece of plywood or something, to a support, right? And so when I'm going to clamp this, I just want this to be as strong as possible, right? Clamping, if I just use a clamp by itself, it's going to be very localized stress, right? And so you can imagine the imprint of a clamp right in here, and it's going to tear through just only these 3 layers and just tear right through it. It might not, but it's easier not to take that chance, right? We're spending 41 grams of material. We might as well make it like 45 and make sure it doesn't break. So instead of this 20% infill, I want 100% infill, but I only want it in this section. And so what I'm going to do, by the way, slice plate, all that does is bring you to the preview, right? So I'm going to go back to prepare, where I can move stuff around and I can change the layer height, by the way. So another thing that is very useful is in these holes, you noticed over here this flatness, right? Because these are approximations, everything is layers, and so it'll just get to a point where it's just completely flat. I don't know if you can see that. And that's literally just because of the height of the layers, right? These are 1/5 of a millimeter, and it's still producing these artifacts that you can very clearly see. I don't care about these holes very much. Like, I don't care that they're nice holes. But if we did, then we could go here. Let's zoom out a little bit. We could go here and we could change. So right now it says 0.2, and I'm going to left click, and there's a warning popping up, but I'll deal with that in a second. Hold on, I'm going to go do that again. So I'm left clicking, I'm holding left click, and it's centered around my mouse. It has changed, so everything else is still the same, but it's just centered around my mouse. It has changed the layer height to 0.082 millimeters. Right, so much finer. That's like less than half the regular layer height. Right, and so I could do it just around there, and again just around there. Right, maybe just a little bit lower. And so it's kind of, and these are kind of sharp. Like I can make this, I can smooth this out a little bit so it's not as sudden, but I don't really care. And so when I go ahead and click So right now, sorry, the error is that the variable layer height is not supported with organic supports, right? So if we want to do this, we have to go back to supports, and we'll change this tree to a normal, right? And we go ahead and slice this again and kind of see. I should actually take in the supports out for a second. I'm gonna uncheck support, and you can see, first of all, this is all normal layer height, and then it gets really fine. Even if it doesn't look very fine, you can still definitely tell the difference between this and this, right? And so it makes that step, this flatness is much less of an area than it was just a minute before, and it's kind of a more graduated circle. Again, this is not one of the techniques that I was talking about to fix this kind of problem, right? This will still exist, and maybe this isn't good enough for you. And so I'll talk more later in CAD on what to do on that front. I'm going to go ahead and go back to prepare. I'm going to reset everything. I don't care about variable layer height, but that's another technique that's very useful. So we're going to not care about that. So now I can bring this back to tree mode. I'm going to slice the plate, and this should be back to where I was before that tangent. Okay, so I want a 100% infill density on just this section right here. It doesn't have to be perfectly exact, but it does need to be there, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add, you can add so many different types of things. I'm going to add what's called a modifier, right? And so you can have different shapes. Like this is a torus, right? A donut. And so if you needed a modifier in the shape of a donut, then there it is. So you can always, it'll give you some default size, and you can shape any of these modifiers and your part as well in here. These are not very quantitative. It shows you the kind of outer dimensions here, but that's about it, right? So keep that in mind. I'm going to go ahead and delete this because I don't want a donut. I wanted a cube. Okay. So I can place this anywhere, right? Notice it's not coming off the page, right? We're not going to print anything. Same with your part. It doesn't come off the page because it doesn't. Uh-oh. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. As I was saying, this doesn't come off the page. So if you're looking at it in plane and you drag it and all of a sudden it disappears, that's because you dragged it over a short distance, but in the other plane, right? So if you imagine this was like just a little bit off. If I drag this a little bit, it's going to go a lot like that way in the red arrow direction, right? Okay, so I want this modifier, and I want it like situated around here, right? So I'm going to scale it to what I need it to be. Again, you can modify it here, or you can just like with quantifiable numbers, or you can just drag, which is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to drag like that. I'll go all the way up to here, center it. Okay, I guess that's not quite centered. It does not be perfect. And then make sure it's all the way this way. Notice this kind of weirdness. You can't bring the part or the thing out of the page, but you can push it into the page at certain times. It's a little weird, don't worry about it. Okay. And right now this is just a yellow block, and it's not even a block, right? It's a modifier, so I don't think this exists on its own. If I go ahead and slice this plate, and I've done nothing to that modifier, so nothing happens, right? It's still printing like normal. However, if I go back to here, and now you can see it's changed this process. If you want to go back, this is the normal view. Global, it's slicing, it's applying all these settings to everything on this plate, and then so you can do both these, right? So it's global. This is still applying everything on this plate, and then to refine this, you can click on objects and click on this object, right? So I mean, you can rename it if you really want to, but this is the modifier that we just made, and we can change any of those global aspects. We can change just in this part. And so what I wanted, all I wanted, was instead of 20%, I want it to be 100%. Right? So that way we don't need 100% infill on the whole part, because that gets a little crazy. But we can easily do 100% infill on here. It gained like 3 grams, but you can see I've sliced the part, and now this is internal solid infill, and this is completely infilled besides those holes. Completely infilled now. Okay, that is all I have to say right now.